Hello, welcome to Only God Rescued Me, my journey from satanic ritual abuse. I am so happy to bring Angie back with us this week for part two. Angie, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to open us up in prayer?
Yeah, we've taken about 40 minutes to connect for no apparent reason. So I'm just grateful that we've connected. I'm grateful that in both of our busy schedules, we've found time. And I'm grateful for your audience and your platform, and most of all, your heart, because even though I could speak to a microphone and try and recount my story in chronological order, it's so much easier when, it says where two or three are gathered together, there I am amongst them. And the prayer of agreement, the power of two believers coming together and creating a safe platform is just beyond. It's very, very powerful. So right. I just pray right now, Jesus. Shabbat Shalom. It's dark now, so the Sabbath is ending in the Republic of Ireland, where I live, and it's only probably lunchtime with you, Lisa, is it? Or 4 hours behind. You're about 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
No, we're about 12.
Oh, 12. Oh, I don't know. It's probably, I don't know what time it is here. I'm so discombobulated. But Lord, I just pray that you ground us, center us, that any altars will come into alignment with your will, and that we would communicate what needs to be communicated today. And I'm very grateful to Lisa for providing that platform. I pray just not our will, but yours be done, God, and that we might reach people and uncover the truth. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now, I said this is part two. So for all the people listening, if you want to go back and hear the first part of Angie's story, it's very important. So you went through about ages 1 through 8 in your first part, and that it's fractured because there's a lot of drugging and stuff that goes on. And because of dissociation, trying to get back all the pieces of our story is very difficult. It's so hard. So that's what you're still struggling to put together. And you're doing it, and you're doing it beautifully. So I applaud you for that. And that you keep going to God in this. And for everybody listening, because I have so many people that reach out to me and they're like, I don't even know if it is SRA. I just have these pieces. Or people are showing me journals where they're drawing rituals and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was real. It's like, that's one of your parts talking to you. So you're helping our listeners with their fractured pieces, which I really appreciate. So what you are doing today is very important.
Yeah, thank you. And I avoided looking at other people's disclosures for years. I started to deprogram, if you like. I've always had certain memories, always, but fully deprogramming I started in 2003 because I made a determined effort not to deprogram whilst I was raising my 3 children, because I wanted to keep it all together to raise my children. So I just shelved the horror memories in my life and thought, I don't know what they are, I'll deal with them later. And then around 2003, I started to deprogram, and I purposely avoided researching too much because I didn't want to adopt anybody else's story. I didn't want to contaminate my own memories and so on. But the 2 people I did read were Kathy O'Brien and Bryce Taylor, Susan Ford. And there's something, although I still think Mark Taylor was a handler right till the end, and that would probably upset Kathy O'Brien to hear me say that. But she said that when you disclose, that's the way to unlock the next level of disclosure. And after speaking to you a week ago, I prayed, obviously I prayed, and And then lots of things started to come back to me. Oh, you forgot this, you forgot that, you forgot this, you forgot that. And so I was very grateful, and it bears out the thing of, you know, I did never go for hypnotherapy or regression therapy or, you know, all the new age solutions like rebirthing and, you know, all of that. I have always said to God, please reveal the hidden parts in my mind, please, Lord. And so the thing I wanted to say was, after speaking with you last week, lots of other memories came back. They weren't gone forever. It's just everything gets compartmentalized. So I kept sending you emails saying, oh, remind me to say this, remind me to say that. So if you've got a prompt list from the, yeah, great.
So you had tunnels in Gibraltar and Corsham.
Yeah, because there's a lot of cynicism about children in the tunnels and things going on in tunnels at the moment, and I do believe there is some, what do you call it, when there's sensationalism going on with the Q movement and blah blah blah, whatever. But at the same time, I can verify firsthand that the first 12 years of my life spent as a child in the Royal Air Force, when we were stationed in Gibraltar, the Rock of Gibraltar, which is huge, and my father got very excited about a special permission he got to take my mother and us children on a tour of the tunnels. And it was usually high, top secret, and you know, very limited access. And so my dad got permission to give us a drive through. So I'm just confirming two things. You know, I was in Gibraltar from the age of 5 till 8, and in that time, my dad drove my mum and our sisters through the tunnels of Gibraltar, which were wide enough for army vehicles, Air Force vehicles, you know, like military vehicles to drive through. That the tunnels in Gibraltar are a thing. And the other memory that reminds me of is the caves of Gibraltar, stalagmites and stalactites. It's a tourist attraction. Tourists aren't allowed or they weren't in my time. Tourists are not usually allowed in the tunnels of Gibraltar, and they cover that by saying it's dangerous. You know, and there's signs outside the tunnels saying no entry, highly dangerous, you know, it might collapse on you or whatever. But the caves of Gibraltar, you can tour certain of them. And my sisters and I were put from a very young age in gifted child programs. And my eldest sister, who's 2 years older than me, she was when we were in Gibraltar, so she was there from 7 till 10. In that time, she got a ballet scholarship, but she also had a 3-hour radio show aged 9. She was a DJ running a family Sunday afternoon, 3 till 6 or something, military radio, which was very well patronized and broadcast. My 9-year-old sister was a DJ on a radio show for 3 years for 3 hours a week. I don't know how long she did it. It might just have been a year or two. But the pop star back then in the 60s, Donovan, who was quite big, he had his 21st birthday party on the Rock of Gibraltar. And there was a big buzz that Donovan, the pop star, was having his 21st, and stars and celebrities were flying in from all over the world for this amazing party. And then everybody was disappointed because no journalists were allowed. And then at the last minute, the only, quote, journalist that was allowed was my 9-year-old sister, who had a DJ spot on the military radio. And she was taken to Donovan's 21st birthday party, and she has no memory of it. She has no memory of it. So that's just to say that there are tunnels in Gibraltar. There were secret parties in the caves, which I believe were rituals, and the same with R.A.F. Rudloe Manor in Corsham in Wiltshire, the west of England. That's the last posting my father had, and there are underground bases that go all the way from there, which is about 100 miles from London. They go all the way to London underground, where you can drive, like. And again, my father, he always liked to show off. He couldn't keep all his classified secrets from his family because he loved showing off. He would tell us, classified secrets. He just loved coming home from work and saying, "Oh my goodness, guess what?" A bit like Kay Griggs' husband, that used to disclose to her. He just couldn't keep it to himself. So my dad used to say, when we were based at R.A.F. Hereford, which was where the SAS were trained, and Black Ops, kind of secret assassins and all that stuff. But when we were based at R.A.F. Rudloe Manor, he got us, again, a tour of the underground bases, and they're pretty well documented. And it was officially where the royal family and the members of parliament, the politicians, would be evacuated if there was an incident in London. So if there was a nuclear threat or whatever there might be in London, there was a way to evacuate the royal family and the politicians, and they could be evacuated underground completely, 100 miles, all the way to Corsham in Wiltshire. And my father took us, my mother and my sisters and I, to those so I can vouch for at least 2 underground bases. That was what I wanted to say about that.
I find it interesting that he did that because God's using you to reveal so many of these things,
Yeah, and that makes me wonder, because I think if you have time and patience, I think this is a 3-parter. The first 8 to 12 years was the hardest to recall because those memories are so fractured. And then from 11 to, when I started to deprogram properly at 43, those are very clear memories. And then since then, this is what I wonder, because I believe I was manipulated and dissociated deliberately into being an asset and a spy. And it makes me sad that is the spying, and this is where I hope God has turned what the devil meant for harm into good, because all the things I witnessed, I'm now disclosing. So I just pray in Jesus' name that I'm disclosing them for good and not for evil.
I believe you are.
Okay, is there any more prompts I missed from the first 12 years? Because the first 12 years are the hardest for me to document.
Drugged dramatic holidays in Morocco.
Okay, yeah, I definitely missed those. So, and something else I'm reminded of is that my nana, Dora Dupre, née Cummins, she had a newspaper clipping saying 5-year-old Angela sang, danced, and recited. And that was in Hornchurch in Essex. So that must have been before we got posted to Gibraltar. And somehow, even though my mother said I spent most of my first years in military hospitals, but somewhere in between that, she taught us all to sing and dance and recite. We were like the Von Trapp family. We were all trained to perform. We were all trained to sing and dance and recite. So even despite my multiple hospital admissions, long stay hospital admissions, the first newspaper clipping about me is 5-year-old Angela sang, danced, and recited. That was in England. But Morocco, when we got to Gibraltar, the border was closed technically with Spain. It was when General Franco was in control, and it was kind of fascist, and Britain had colonized Gibraltar, so the border was shut. But when my father used to breach the border multiple times, and the local Catholic priest who went on to become the Bishop of Gibraltar, they could breach the closed border, and they did a lot of smuggling of luxury cars and pedigree dogs and all sorts. But we used to go to Morocco a lot for holidays in the 3 years that we were based there. And there are just stark. I'm reminded of the Hampstead case, because Morocco is where the children from the Hampstead case first disclosed in 2014. But my father used to take my mum and us 5 little girls and a dog, and usually an R.A.F handler as well. There would be, for some bizarre reason, on almost every trip, there would be a Royal Air Force extra man, like, come along. And I never understood why. But things would happen, like one time we had to flee, and my father was in such a hurry to get us away. He drove at top speed from a petrol, gas station, and he left behind the trailer that was like, we had a camper thing that you used to tow, and he left it behind in the garage. And then when, like, one of my sisters said, Daddy, you've left the trailer behind. But the family legend is that, we had to flee because Daddy apparently traded my mother and 5 children for 7 camels, but he says he was only joking. But the Moroccan took him seriously and was chasing us down to make my dad keep his side of the bargain. And it used to just be a family joke. And it's only when you reflect on it and you think, my dad drove out of that area of Morocco as if his life depended on it. And the family myth is, I did a trade and he took me seriously. But I do believe we were trafficked there, but not for permanent exchange, So I think that was a trafficking deal that went wrong. And other times, the handler, we were forced to eat a meal that absolutely, it was like eating poison. And we were really hungry because we were kept hungry. It was kind of part of the programming. And we were forced to eat this meal on the last day of the holiday in Morocco. Like, we went on holiday there. Holiday, I say that, but mostly they're drugged memory loss times. But on this particular time, we were forced to eat this meal that felt like eating just poison. And we were told, I can't even remember the handler's name, the extra person that came along. But we were told, he offered to cook and he's put too much salt in. So we don't want to be rude. So you're all going to eat it and nobody's to say a word. Don't complain. And so we're eating this horrendous stew or whatever it is. But again, with adult hindsight, I don't think it was that the R.A.F handler guy put too much salt in. I think it was a heavily poisoned meal for the last night we were there. And then the other travels we did during the time in Gibraltar have drug memories. And one was, we drove back, I think it might have been 1966, for my grandparents' golden wedding in Ireland. And we drove back from Gibraltar. the border must have been open by then, because I think we drove through France and Germany, or Germany and France, and then got the boat to Rosslare or something. I was only about 6 or 7, but on the way through France, we stopped at a French chateau, which is like a castle. And we were all dressed up in lovely little white dresses and white frilly socks and black patent leather shoes. And it didn't make sense at all. Why would, why, when we're traveling in apparent sort of, working class standard of living, why are we calling into a castle or a chateau? And we called into this chateau, and there was a banquet going on. And I remember a pig's head with an apple in the mouth. Have you ever seen that? It's pretty horrendous. It's like part of the banquet was a pig's head with an apple in the mouth. And I remember being horrified at that. And then I remember being shocked that it literally was like the banqueting table was heaving with luxury fare, and the beef was so rare it was dripping blood, and so I remember traveling for hours in the car, on this epic 5-day journey from Gibraltar to Ireland by car. But I remember thinking, why are we going to a palace in France or a chateau? And why is there this banquet? And why has the pig got an apple in its mouth? And why is the beef dripping blood? And then no memory at all. Again, this is a common theme. It's like you find yourself in like a movie set, and then you black out, So even I say to myself, even you could say I was only 6 or 7, and maybe I only have partial memories, but why would I have such snapshot memories of the apple in the mouth of the pig or the boar or whatever it was, and the beef dripping blood, and then the amazement of why are we in a castle, and then nothing. So there's too many of those memories where strange things are followed by blackout, no memory,
And I have those as well. And you hear that from survivors, very vivid memory until you're given something to eat or drink, and then nothing.
Yeah, and that's their victory. That's what they're so filled with themselves. That's why they experimented with LSD and scopolamine, and there was somebody infiltrated a pedophile group on the dark web about 4 or 5 years ago when I was doing some research. And the whole group was abuzz about the latest drugs that would have the child victims never recall being raped.
Wow.
But the body remembers. The body, I do believe, there's a book called that, but I do believe the body internalizes the memories of the trauma. So even if, like me at 65, you still can't recall every detail, but the trauma is still there. The trauma is still there.
My therapist told me about a murder, and they took the organs of the person that was murdered to give to somebody else. And the person that got this person's heart started having nightmares of the murder, and through those nightmares were able to convict the murderer.
Wow.
So yeah, they're talking about how we take in the cells of our bodies, take in what is happening. So it really doesn't matter that our minds are drugged, our bodies are taking in everything. And that's what the demonic doesn't understand, or our parents don't understand, or the abusers don't understand. Our bodies are taking it all in.
Yeah.
It says whatever's done in the dark, he will reveal, because God sees all of it.
Absolutely. And I think our spirit recalls as well.
Absolutely.
And I just find that I just find that to be true. So, so I talked about France. I've talked about the Moroccan holidays. Another time, well, two other times we were, well, I can show you in the next one my German birth certificate. When I was born in a military hospital in Germany, I was allegedly accidentally given a German birth certificate, which is just weird. I should have either got a military British birth certificate or an Irish birth certificate, but I was given a German one. And again, the family legend was, oh, the military registrar was on holiday or vacation, and my mother wanted to get me registered. So she cycled into the German town and got me a birth certificate. But it's very strange that I have a German birth certificate. I could claim German passport, German, citizenship, and I was engineered at least 4 or 5 times trying to get me to marry a German. And I was given a godmother while my parents lived out there, whose husband was already convicted. Well, he was convicted of exposing himself in a children's playground, and he went on to abuse my siblings and myself, and I suspect dozens, if not hundreds of others. But that was one of the stops when we would do our epic journey from Gibraltar into Spain, into France, to Ireland. Somehow we went through Germany and we stayed. So not only did we call into a French chateau, we also called to my godmother and her husband, who, orally raped my sister on the first visit there. And she told my mum what he did. And then my mum, because she kept getting electroshock treatment and she was a victim as well, very dissociative, she says she forgot that my sister had disclosed that to her the year before. And then we were taken there again, and then he did it again. And then I was sent there for a month every summer from the age of 12. So it seemed to me like trafficking. It just, with hindsight, it looks like pure trafficking, especially the chateau. Like, why did we all have to dress in our prettiest white dresses with, why did we have to dress so pretty to call into this banquet in a castle? What possible reason could there be for that? I don't know.
Right. You mentioned it floated out of my brain.
Yeah. That's what happens with DID. That's why I sent you notes, because I can read creative writing I did years ago, or attempts at disclosure, or poetry, or whatever. And when I read it, I have no memory of having written those things. I only know that it's in my own handwriting that I wrote those things, and I remember those things. So that's part of, I think, dissociation and compartmentalization. So I can like, this is why it was so helpful to talk to you last week, because I talked to you and told you what I knew on the surface, then other memories started floating up. But if I don't grab them straight away, it's a bit like when they say to you, write a dream journal.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't write your dream down, and not every dream is significant, but some dreams are from God, and if you don't write them down in that waking moment, it's gone. You can't remember. You can't remember. So it's the same with compartmentalized memories. I could have a memory and think, oh, quick, write that down, because otherwise the next day it'll be gone again. Yeah.
Not gone, but it'll keep coming back and forth.
Floats away, and it makes like I had a publicist. I was sponsored in Louisiana in about 2009 on a 10-day visit, and they set up speaking engagements for me in a homeless shelter, in a women's prison, in a school, in a church, in a conference center. They set up 10 days of speaking engagements to me. And then a publicist approached me and said, if you just write a book, I will be your publicist. I will get you booked across America. And I've never been able, I know you said to me to try and persevere and do it myself, because of that floating away thing and the dissociation thing and the triggering. Since 2009, I've been trying to chronologically write things down, and it always evades me. It always triggers me too much, or I can't get it in sequence, or the memories float away.
Yeah. Getting a book in sequence or getting an interview in sequence is so, it's almost impossible.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah. And because like a memory doesn't come start to finish. And that was frustrating when I was talking to the detective when I went and, you know, pressed charges against my father and everything. Because he's like, well, how did you get to these rituals? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
How did you get home after? I don't know.
Which makes us so easy to discredit.
Yeah. He's like, they're going to make you look bad.
Yeah.
I know. There, you know, but I didn't know, you know, that you only get these little bits in little pieces because of the drugging, because of the dissociation. It's tough. It's really tough.
I've watched most of your testimony. I know you've got vast amounts of evidence, and I do too, but to put it in order and sequence is my goal before I die, is to put it down at least in writing. But did you ever get any justice?
No.
Wow.
The scuttlebutt, and it's a small town, so you can't say for sure, but that the sheriff at the time, who has since died, was part of the group.
Yeah.
And that he went to the detective and said, if you want to keep your job, you will give me all the evidence.
Wow.
And he needed to keep the job, so he gave it to him. And the last I heard, someone asked him about my case, and he goes, I don't know, Lisa Meister.
Yeah, I tried, and it got covered up by the coroner, the local GP, the local police. It got covered up every step of the way, you know. And the best thing I can think is that the advent of the internet and recording. So I recorded the inquest, and I recorded some of the interviews with the police, and
Good.
so I've documented the fact, like even when I tried to report the military side of the abuse in the UK, because it was the British Air Force my father joined, I have emails from them saying the Irish police are not cooperating with us, the British Royal Air Force are not cooperating with us, the health board are not cooperating with us, we can't get your medical records, we've tried the ombudsman, we've tried every avenue of influence we have, and we're hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
So at least I have that documented, you know.
That's good. Yeah.
So anyway,
I went to the hospital and they're like, oh, we don't have any records of you. I went to the doctor that I had growing up. Oh, we don't have any records of you.
Yeah. The first 12 years of my medical history, where I'm supposed to have spent the most of 5 years in hospital and was not allowed to do sports or exert myself or whatever, no records can be found. I've got emails from the Royal Air Force saying to the detectives investigating, sorry, we have no records.
Yeah.
We have no medical records for that.
We have no idea why. Yeah.
Anyway, so is there anything else I think I covered everything. Is there anything else I missed in the first 8 to 12 years?
Wooden hanger beating ritual.
Yeah, that's later on. And it's interesting, you said something that triggered that for me earlier, that a lot of this is rituals. Even there's a program called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and it's filmed in the jungle. but what they're doing is rituals where they bury you in a coffin, or they force you to eat bugs, or they cover you with snakes, or they put you in danger in water, near drowning, near death experiences. Those are all rituals. So, but the wooden hanger thing, I don't know why I put that, but that was when I was 12 and my dad had left the Air Force, which didn't make them happy at all. They didn't want him to leave. They wanted to post him out to the Persian Gulf, which is now Iran, but they wanted to send my dad there unaccompanied so they could continue with the programs and experiments they were doing on my sisters and I. But my mum threatened to, well, she just said, if you sign on for another 5 years in the Air Force, I don't know what threat she gave my dad, but she just said no more. And so, much to the disgust of the Air Force, after 25 years, my dad wouldn't agree to go overseas unaccompanied again and leave mum and us children wide open to experiments and placements and trauma.
So he wanted some control in that, do you think?
Well, for some, my dad was quite important in the early years of the programming of my mother and us 5 little girls. But as we got a bit older, it seemed like the Air Force wanted to put my dad out of the picture and then continue to move my sisters and I around like pawns on a chessboard. We were being privately educated all the way through his Air Force career. We were being privately educated in Jesuit influenced convent schools, Catholic convent schools. And I talked about when we were in Gibraltar, they seem to have a lot of gifted child programs. I've got an appointment at 6 o'clock. I don't know what the time is, but
We're good. It's 36 after.
Oh, that's great. Well, in Gibraltar, my older sister, seemed to be the first one in the gifted child program, where she had the 3 hours a week DJ gig at 9, and she had a ballet scholarship. And then when we came back to the UK, we kept getting told we were sitting our 11 plus, which is like an entrance exam in the UK education system, but it was over and over again. We kept sitting these exams that didn't make any sense, and it was like profiling to see where you would best be placed as an asset who was already dissociated and compliant and traumatized. So I don't know why I said the coat hanger. Like, so when my dad left the Air Force, that they were furious about, because they tried to he'd already spent a year in Madeira in the Air Force and left my mum and us 5 girls, behind in England because he was on an unaccompanied posting. And I think we were heavily in programs by then. My older sister had moved from the gifted child thing to, she was eventually taken into care at 14 as a uncontrollable juvenile delinquent. It went from gifted child in Gibraltar to juvenile delinquent in Wiltshire, and she got first of all placed with a Navy officer's family. Then she got placed in a children's home. Then she got placed permanently in a care home with an order of a minimum 50-mile distance from the family and no family contact allowed. So, but the other sisters, the 4 of us younger ones, I was number 3. My dad bought a listed building in Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire, and he converted it into a 150-seater restaurant, and we lived above it, and so the big thing was cigarettes, and I think nicotine, it wasn't just an Edward Bernays or Edmund Bernays experiment to make women smoke cigarettes. I think it was used as addiction seeding and programming. I think a lot of victims were seeded with addictions in order for us to self-destruct at a young age or not be credible witnesses. So even though neither of my parents smoked cigarettes, but all of my sisters and I did, and I still do. And Fiona had smoked we used to get terrible beatings for it. But Fiona, who's dead since 2015, she was smoking a cigarette and she threw the butt out of the window over the restaurant, and bizarrely, it landed on a policeman's shoulder and burnt a hole in his uniform jacket. And he went into the restaurant and said to my father, somebody from that upstairs window has just thrown a cigarette out the window and it's burnt my uniform and I want compensation. And so my dad compensated him and then came up and beat my sister with a wooden hanger, which is a real heavy, I should have brought one out to show you, but a really heavy duty old-fashioned wooden hanger. He beat her so badly that, you know, we regularly used to wet ourselves with terror during beatings, and she could hardly walk the next day. And I witnessed the beating she got, and I often witnessed, and that's what they talk about with ritual abuse, is that sometimes it's equally traumatic to see somebody else abused as it is to be beaten yourself or abused yourself. So I was the youngest of the three older children, so often my dad would beat the eldest one first, brutally, you know, to a pulp almost, then beat the next one. But the trauma of me watching my two older sisters getting beaten and knowing that I was next is almost as severe as the beating. But my sister got beaten with a wooden hanger so badly she couldn't walk the next day, and she was utterly traumatized. And when my father went down to run the restaurant after the brutal beating, you know, back to work, business as usual, I said to her, we have to run away. Like, our older sister was already put into care, and she and I were the next two oldest. And I said, we have to run away. We have to tell somebody. We have to run away. And she's like, okay, we'll run away. And so I made a plan. I packed her stuff and my stuff, and I packed as if we were definitely going for good. And then I set the alarm for something like 4 a.m. to make sure my parents had come up from the restaurant, gone to bed, fallen asleep. And then before we ran away, I placed wooden hangers on every eave of the doors. I wanted to torture my father with what he had done to my sister. I wanted to show him. I wanted to show him the torture tools that he'd used and make him sorry. And then I went into my sister at 3 or 4 a.m, whatever it was, and I said, right, I'm ready, everything's packed, they're asleep, let's go. And then she said, I can't. And she just gave me her post office savings book, which had 10 shillings in it. This was back in the late 70s. Yeah, and she just said, you go, you tell. And I think I just went back to bed utterly defeated, because I thought, because that wasn't the first time my sisters and I had tried to escape. Another time, I think it might have been even in Gibraltar, we set off, the three of us, after a very, very, very severe beating. And we set off, the three of us, the three older ones, to go and find a policeman and tell them. And then as we're walking, my older sister saying, oh, you know, if we tell, Daddy will go to jail and we'll all be put in an orphanage. And by the time we got a mile up the road, she'd talked us out of disclosing.
Wow. So your oldest sister that got put into the home, did you find out why? Was she telling somebody about what went on? Why did she get put away?
Well, I don't want to talk too much about her, because she's back in denial.
Okay.
And totally trauma bonded. No, I'll leave that for another conversation.
That's fair.
The one that died, or I believe was murdered, she was deprogramming, and she and I were starting to piece together everything, and sadly she died. So I'm trying to discipline myself to stay within my own disclosure, because it's traumatic enough. If I add in, like, I believe my sister that died was part of a project for swapping babies at birth. So there was a thing going on at the military hospital where military men were recruited to make two women pregnant at the same time, their wife and another. And then they do a baby swap in the hospital. And then they'd observe the mother-baby-child bond to see if it was nature or nurture. And I believe my sister was a victim of that. My sister that died 10 days before taking a DNA test with my mum. My older sister, you know, she had a fractured skull aged 8, and yet was utterly devoted to my father, like Mengele, just utterly devoted to the end, despite having a fractured skull aged 8, and despite being put in care at 14 after being a gifted child, despite having dissociation and mass memory gaps. She adored my father till the end, and hates me because I have said what I've said.
Yeah.
Doesn't talk to me, hates me. You know. So yeah. So but the part, I don't know how we're doing for time. What time is it now?
37 after.
Let me just have a look. All right, yeah, so I've got about 10 more minutes. The part I wanted to cover today, which is part 2, but I'm so grateful because part 1 was so hard. Did I miss any other notes? Did you have any more?
We got through all of them.
We got through it, so thank God, and I'm sorry it took so long. The next part, so the first 5 years, and then up to 12 when my dad came out of the Air Force, and then that was the age at which my older sister gets put in care. My then next older sister, the one who died, was sent away at 14 to boarding school, and horribly neglected in boarding school. No pocket money, no visits home, no weekends, no clothing allowance, just literally, because I had an auntie that was a nun, and she was the go-to person to hide us children if we were beaten or mute or in trauma, or she would just find a convent or somewhere in the Catholic Church system that we could be hidden until we could function again. But so from 12 to 18, my two older sisters had been removed by the age of 14, but I was allowed to stay at home until 18 because I was doing well at school and was a high achiever. And my mother sort of had ambitions, unfulfilled ambitions of her own, that she lived vicariously through me. So I was like acting and doing ballet, and at 12 I had finally rebelled and said, I'm not going to refrain from sports and activity anymore. I don't care the consequences. I want to do hockey and netball and whatever. I want to participate. And so I did. And then went from 12 to 18. My dad was hitting his kind of 40s, and he had rampant affairs and was quite successful we had a restaurant, 150-seater restaurant, I told you. So he was experiencing great success, but he was also more interested in his work with the elites, you can call them, the predator class, the hunting, shooting, fishing community in the UK. And but before that, before he even left the Air Force, there was things about Salisbury. There was lots of secret missions. There's probably more to uncover in the early years. But so from 12 to 18, for me, it was a case of running the restaurant with my mother and still having drugging blocks, memory gaps, and then finding, this was where it first started, with being placed around elites. So I started a babysitting agency, and one of the first regular jobs I got was with a lord and lady. I don't know, have you heard of Nancy Astor, the first female to fly the Atlantic or something? I don't know. Anyway, she was an aristocrat, pilot, and very much part of what people call today the Illuminati. So I found myself babysitting for Lord and Lady Jolliffe, and his wife was the niece of Nancy Astor. So I kept finding myself being placed around British aristocracy and then eventually royalty, Saudi royalty and Austrian royalty. And I couldn't find any good reason for that. I was bright and well educated, privately educated, and but it felt very engineered. So even from the babysitting stage, my dad was moving. His excuse for always being amongst aristocracy and royals and elites, I don't like that word, but his excuse was because he was a dog trainer and a horse whisperer, and so they coveted his expertise in their shooting world mostly, and that was the excuse, but it was a cover, in my opinion. I'm so sorry to do this, but I've got an appointment in 5 minutes, and I want to talk to you about the next memory before we left the Air Force, before I get on to 12 to 18. And I don't need to go into it at great length, but the human hunting, I have two memories, one very, very clear. Did I tell you about the human hunting?
I believe you did. A little
Okay.
bit in the last one.
Okay, maybe I did. Then that's
somebody else. So go ahead and say it again.
okay. Well, we'll finish with this. But before my dad left the British Royal Air Force on our last posting at R.A.F. Rudloe Manor, there were many memories, drug a drug hidden partial fractured memories. Like, for instance, particularly my sister Fiona and I, Dad would say to my mother, I'm taking ferrets out to hunt rabbits at night, and I'll take the two girls with me. It'll be an adventure for them. So we would go out at midnight, on these forest expeditions, supposedly hunting for rabbits or something. And then, so I have recounted consistently, and this is a memory I've disclosed to the police in a police video, ABE interview. I've disclosed this in a DVD I made in 2009. It's just a frozen memory of running for my life and finally falling over on my face, and then blank, and then regaining consciousness on my back, and then being surrounded by several men, one of which was in an army general's uniform, and whom I later identified. Yeah, I did tell you that in the first interview. So I'm sorry, I want to get on to, even though there was much ado, I was being abused consistently from 12 to 18, being sent to Germany every month to a known paedophile and being consistently abused daily. There's much there, but I want to get on to in the next, if we can do this again, the next part, I want to get on to being placed at 18 with people like the Saudi royal family, and with people like BCCI, which was a CIA money laundering bank, international bank, and with politicians, diplomats, like people in the running for Secretary General of the United Nations, starlets being married into Austrian royalty. I just seem to be placed strategically, and it's I have proof, but it sounds like a movie, but it literally was like being an asset that never got a salary. It was like literally being placed in strategic situations over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that next time.
Okay, and I'm sorry it's
so much.
Pardon? Yeah, I'm sorry it's taking so long. I really wish I could condense this.
No, that's fine. We'll take all the time you need.
Okay, can you pray us out?
Yes, thank you so much, God, for Angie and for her ability to explain what's happened to her. Lord, I thank you that you bring out all that's done into darkness to life. And Lord, I just thank you that you're exposing the darkness, and that you're exposing the people that did this, and that they don't get away with it because they stand before you for all that they've done. And Lord, I speak peace to Angie and her life. And I just thank you for and ask that you bless her and just continue to heal her. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. I'll talk to you next week. We'll hopefully connect a lot more smoothly next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
God bless.
Bye.